by way of introduction, I just want to tell you guys that I wrote an email to Seth 6 years ago. Seth, I don't know if you remember this.
I still have it.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, you had written this really great article in Cloth, Paper, Scissors in 2016. And it was called Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. And the Guild was just getting ready to do an exhibit called Branching Out, which was very pertinent to the article. And I had written Seth to ask if we could reproduce it and send it to the Guild, but the magazine was not terribly thrilled with that. So I think we ended up having to drop it. But anyway, I follow Seth on Instagram and on Facebook and see what he's doing. And he's doing a lot. So I'm just going to let him talk about his mixed media work and all the different aspects of his business and his art and his community and all that. So all yours, Seth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to thank everybody for showing up and let you know there will be a slideshow going in the background, just sharing some of the artwork that I've made. I'm not going to reference it all along, but it'll just be something for you to focus on, get a better sense of what I do. And I also want to thank the Nancys and Judy for inviting me. Just really appreciate the opportunity to share my story and to have a conversation. And I asked if perhaps people could ask questions during the talk, so it's less of a lecture and more of a conversation, which is what I really would appreciate. So I want to just start by telling you a little bit about how I got into art, because I don't really consider myself the best storyteller. Happily, this is such a good story. It just sort of tells itself, which makes it a lot easier. Currently, a lot of what I do is based on the notion of community and connection and collaboration. And I think as you hear my story, you'll understand where and why that is true. First of all, if you don't know me, just to give you the very brief rundown, my name is Seth Apter. I'm a mixed media artist. I live in New York City, and I have been doing some form of art really in the latter part of my life, not the early part of my life, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But as you can see, I work in mostly paper. I work on wood, on panels and boards. I do some fiber work, a lot of collage, a lot of paint, and I dabble in a lot of things, as most of us do, including hoarding wonderful supplies. But I'm sure many of you know about that. So just to give you a little bit of the background of how I got into art, as a younger person, art held no interest to me as a maker. I just was never interested in creating art. And the only time I did it was when I had to in school. But I will say that as a kid, I was dragged literally to the museums and other opportunities that New York City had by my family. And as much as I didn't like it then, it certainly set me up for what I do now. Prior to being an artist, I actually had a full other life, which was, although I'm always hesitant to say it in the very beginning, but prior to this, I was a psychologist, first working at Mount Sinai Hospital for 16 years and then my own private practice. And was quite happy doing both of those things until, as luck would have it, one year, it was actually the year 2000, I was traveling. It was the first time I traveled on my own, and I was traveling in the Pacific Northwest. I went to Portland, then Seattle, and then Vancouver in Canada. And while I was in Vancouver, I just had an incident happen, one of those serendipitous moments that just redirected my entire life, really. And as I said, I was not interested in making art, but I loved art by then. So I would go into galleries wherever I was and just really enjoyed looking at art. So when I was in Vancouver, I stopped into this gallery that just called my name. At that time, the New York gallery scene was primarily in Soho, and this gallery just really felt like it would fit. And I just was mesmerized by the art. It was abstract, it was textural, it was encaustic, it was cement. I didn't even know what it was exactly at that point. And I asked the woman who was at the gallery desk, could you tell me about the artist? and she introduced herself. Her name was Patricia Larson, and she was the gallery owner, but also the artist. And I was a little like overwhelmed because I was talking to the artist. And normally at that time, when you went into a gallery in New York City, you guys might remember, and it's still true to some degree today, no one talks to you. So I was talking to the artist, and we just struck up a great conversation. I actually spent a couple hours there and ended up buying a few small pieces of her work, and then went home back to my normal life, working as a psychologist, thinking that that was just a wonderful vacation. And about a week or two after I got home, I received a postcard from Patricia, and it was a handmade postcard. And it was a postcard basically thanking me for buying the work and just asking me, how was it like to live with it? By the by, later on, I realized what a great thing to do as an artist to somebody who buys your work. So I was just so kind of taken by the fact that she sent me that postcard, and it was a handmade postcard. And I just was like, it would have been a little piece of art I would have bought. And I felt like I needed to thank her. So I felt like I had to thank her in kind. So I made a postcard. And let me tell you, it was the first thing I've made since I was a kid, like, crayon kid. So I don't even know what it looks like. I can't remember, but I mailed it back to her. And then I went back to my life and thought that was the end, until a couple of weeks later, I get another piece of mail from her. And this time it was like a watercolor kind of abstract piece on an old book page, a vintage book page. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And then all of a sudden it hit me as like, like, how am I going to send her like something like this? Like, it was pretty easy to make a postcard. So I remember I went to a shop in the city and I bought like a little kid's watercolor, really cheap watercolor set. And I kind of just tried to copy what she did, and it looked horrible, but I sent it anyway. And lo and behold, I get something else from her. And over the course of about 3 or 4 years, I would say, we had what I now know and have known for a while, but didn't know then, basically a mail art relationship. And the things got bigger and badder in all seriousness. She would make little mini books. She would just these amazing, incredible creations. She's an exceptional person and has over the years become an incredible friend. Our families connected. We traveled to Italy together. She moved to Mexico from Vancouver, and I helped her find a place and move her. Our lives have really intertwined over the last, shockingly, 22 years. And she brought me into the world of art. The thing I learned most from Patricia was that being an artist is not just making art. She is an artist. I'm just going to type her name in the chat in case anybody wants to look her up. Being an artist is sort of how you think, how you live, the way you dress, the way you interact, how you spend your time. So many life lessons and art lessons from Patricia. Every time I got something in the mail from her, it was like an education for me. And I just learned more, and I became very curious about what she would send. And I wasn't planning on this, but if I can roll across the room for 1 second, I will be right back, because I do like some show and tell. So trust me when I say this is just like a little bit of the stuff that was sent to me. I mean, I have boxes and boxes. So what started happening was that art just became kind of a hobby for me. And it became an escape. Being a psychologist is challenging. And my specialty has always was in sort of medical neurological rehab. So I worked with a lot of brain injury patients and spinal cord injury patients, which is very intense work. And it became my escape, and it became just a pleasure. So that's all it was to me. I'm not minimizing it. It just was never meant to be anything else. And then time passed, and I started to just get more pulled into the world of art. And at this time, and I know many of you, I'm sure, have been around working in art for in this period, all of a sudden blogs became a thing. And I started to find a community through blogs, long form blogs. And it seemed like everybody had a blog, because of course there was no such thing as social media. And so I became kind of connected with some other artists just through the blog, but really no one knew me. Like I didn't even tell my friends really that I was doing this. So I was just kind of hiding in plain sight in a manner of speaking. But in 2007, I sort of joined the blog club, and I decided it was time for me to kind of sort of put myself out there hesitantly. And my blog was called The Altered Page. I did not want to make it my name at that time. And it just became something that grew unexpectedly. And one of the reasons, Kathleen, what's up?
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
That last piece that you showed, I'm in love with it. Can you explain what it actually is? Is it a painting? Is it a collage?
When you
What
say the last
exactly
piece,
are the implements of the art piece?
the one before the current one?
The current one, they're all beautiful. The one that's mostly blue.
Oh, that is it's a collage. It's collage and paint, which is very common for me. So when I collage, it's usually using painted papers of my own, or it's one layer amongst everything. So that particular one, a lot of my work is sort of monotone in the sense of kind of keeping in one color palette. So that work just has a lot of collage and a lot of mark making. It will roll around again, and when it does, I can reference it one more time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. But very, very consistent with a lot of the approaches I take with a lot of my work. Thank you for asking that. After my blog came out, I realized that very early on, art for me was not about like just making art and kind of being in a studio. I didn't have a studio, of course, at that time. I wasn't anything. I was just playing. But because I learned art with Patricia and trading things back and forth, it set me on a path that art was about collaboration and community and connection. So right after I started my blog, I decided to do a project on the blog, which I called The Pulse. And The Pulse is basically an interview. And it was probably the first time I kind of crossed the worlds of psych and art, because it was an interview where I asked questions, but I asked kind of deeper questions. It wasn't like, what's your favorite color questions? It was like things like, have you ever lost a friendship over art? Or, does your family accept your art? That kind of a little deeper. And the first time I did it, I had 35 artists answer these questions, and it just became kind of a thing, my thing, and it just built. And over the course of a number of years, I did it 5 times. And by the time I finished, I had 150 participants, and it became kind of a bigger thing. So it kind of pulled me more and more into the world of art until one day, I guess it was sort of the dream came true, even though I promise you it was not my dream. Just, like being an artist has never been my dream until now that I'm actually am one. But I got an email from somebody who said, I saw your blog from a link from another blog, and I saw you do this thing called The Pulse. Really like it. It's so interesting. Have you ever thought of turning it into a book? And I hadn't, but then I'm like, as soon as they said that, I'm like, sure. And then I kept reading, and it turns out the writer was an acquisitions editor at a publishing place at Northlight Books. Long story short, I proposed it, and I have a book. The book came out in 2012, and the book is called The Pulse of Mixed Media. It's the first of 2 books that I've written, and it's really about creativity and art. It's that interview series on paper, basically. So it's not about me. It's not a how-to book. It's they're what it's like to be an artist kind of book. That just flipped the switch for me, because having a book published with sort of a reputable publishing house just all of a sudden gave me street cred and vetted me in a way that I wasn't even thinking about, because again, I was still a full-time psychologist. This was just things I was doing, and other opportunities happened. And at that point, there was a little bit of a fork in the road, and I started to take it more seriously, still being a full-time psychologist. And I decided to take some classes. So I took some classes at the Center for Book Arts in New York City, and really bookbinding is really my first passion. And now this is actually a book my form of what a book is that you just saw on the screen. They're very wonky. I learn the right way, and then I do it, kind of my way, which is all about the mess of mixed media. And I began to write my second book, and I just began to be more connected with the art world. I started to teach at some of the local sort of mixed media places like the Ink Pad in New York City, which I'm sure many of you know. Many of you also know is either, well, has literally just closed, unfortunately. And starting to teach just brought things to a different level. And over the course of the next X number of years, it just grew and grew, and it grew to the point where I just couldn't stop it from growing in me. And I decided that, this is really how I want to spend sort of the rest of my life. So I took a very long time to make a transition as a full-time psychologist to a part-time psychologist, to a part-time artist, taking risks, taking chances, doing lots of different things, and just building that much more consciously, to the point where at one point, well, actually 2 or 3 points, I decided I was going to stop being a psychologist and I guess retire. I didn't really use that word, but retire and become the full-time artist. And I wasn't ready for a while. And at some point I knew it was just time. So I am now officially, and have been for a while, retired as a psychologist. I don't practice anymore. And I am now a kind of full-time working artist, doing my best to survive through a pandemic and paying New York City rent, which I know you more than anybody, like when I talk to the people in Phoenix, they might not quite get that in the same way that I know you guys get. It has been oh, Bernadette?
Unmute. Hi, your work is really fascinating, and I'm wondering if you get a concept before you start a piece, or the materials give you the idea, or is it a little bit of both? It's really interesting to see how you combine things and where it all comes from in your head. Or
it's a really good question. I am of the belief that unless you are creating something like a quilt or, say, a traditional bound book, that when you work in mixed media, my phrase that I use is thinking is the death of creativity. I just do not think it's good to overthink. I do everything in my power to work in a way that stops me from overthinking. So I've long ago given up on having any idea when I start a piece where it's going. When I used to do that, I failed miserably because mixed media takes you in places you don't expect. And if you try to stay on track with that, all you do is get frustrated. At least all I did was get frustrated. So I never know where a piece is going. But your question is really good because I am very, very material driven, supply driven. So it might literally be finished one piece and I look down and there's this little scrap of collage, and that is what sets me going on my next piece. Where it's going to go, I don't know. I always say also I let the layer tell me what to do. So no matter what medium I use, if I use fiber, if I use paint, if I use collage, I use it like I paint. So if you take a layer, like your first layer of gesso, you literally cannot lift up the gesso and go under it. So I always just go. Something gets glued, something gets painted, something gets stitched, and then I move on from there. And I always work from that section on. Each layer or element determines what goes next. So there's no turning back. I call myself a collage committer as opposed to a collage auditioner. I never lay pieces out and move them and they don't work and this goes a half an inch, let me try again. It immediately gets glued and then I go. And so all these pieces you're seeing here involve a lot of what I do. It's paint, it's collage, a lot of hand painted papers, mark making, stitching, threads, found objects. They're all fair game. Judy, did you have a Judy K? Thanks, Bernadette.
Thank you.
Yes, I was wondering if you work on one piece at a time and finish it, or are you working on multiple different pieces at the same time?
Also a really good question. And to answer Karen's quick question in the chat, I stitch by hand. I do have a machine. which I bought about 8 years ago, and which I frustratingly tried to thread many times, and that machine lives in its box in the closet. One day it will come out. And in terms of working on multiple pieces, I always work on multiple pieces. I work on 3, 4, or 5 at a time. I find that when I work on one piece, I often would get, I guess, it's not exactly blocked, but I'm not always in the mood to work on it, and I really need to be in the mood to work on it. So if I have 4 or 5 things going at once, there's always something I'm really excited about or really eager to get back to. And so I feel like that just always keeps me, every time I'm working on whatever I'm working on, really in the moment and really excited by it. Thanks, Judy. Alice?
I see you have a lot of handmade paper there. Do you make your own paper?
I do not. I never have, and I probably need to. I do source out handmade paper when I can get it, and sometimes I'm lucky and I can be gifted some and things like that. But no, I've never actually made paper, which I feel like should be a no-brainer for me, but I just haven't. Thanks, Alice.
Do you name your pieces?
I do. I name them mostly at the end. So the piece that you're seeing now is called A Hint of Dark. Naming is really important to me. I do use text in a lot of my work. And so sometimes I defer to the text because there's a reason why that text is there. But I do love naming work, but I'm not always very good at it. Like some pieces name themselves and it feels so organic and so right. But other pieces don't. And just a minor funny story, back in the day when I was working with Patricia, she would never remember the name of her work, like ever. Like I'd say like, oh my God, I saw that piece that was called like The Moon and the Stars. And she's like, what, which one was that? I never understood that. But now that I create and I name my pieces, some of them I remember, but honestly, somebody will say, oh my God, remember that one from last year? And they'll say the name and I'll, no, which one was that one? And I think some of my pieces, I use names over and over again, forgetting that I've used those names in the past as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
I was wondering also whether you wax your pieces.
You mean like Dorland wax to seal them or like encaustic work?
Encaustic, yeah.
No, I do not do encaustic. I have, but I don't own it. I don't own the equipment. In New York City apartment, ventilation, space, I like it. Every time I've done it with friends. I have created a product. I'm not here to like shill my products, mind you, but I'll point it out when you see it coming up. It's an embossing powder that I call vintage beeswax, and it has no beeswax in it, and it's certainly not vintage because it's a new product, but it is it creates an encaustic effect. Pull a piece off the wall to show you. And I know I'm not spotlighted, so it's going to be really hard for you to see. But so I don't know if anybody on the side can get a sense of that. But this is sort of 3 layers of that, which, believe you me, I know it's not encaustic, and I'm not pretending it is. Any encaustic artist would scoff at that, but it just has kind of a flavor and it's quite easy. And except for breathing in, plastic fumes, it's pretty safe. And of course, we all have masks now, so it's easy to grab a mask. So thank you for that. Ruby, you had a question for a while, and then I'll get back to the chat.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to know what size the pieces are, Seth.
I work small.
Me too. Sorry.
Okay. Most of the work, like the piece that's showing right now, that's either 6 by 6 inches or 7 by 7 inches.
Good, got it.
Which is a pretty typical size. I rarely go over a 12 by 12, although I have made collages and paintings that are 3 feet by 3 feet. But I love putting as much detail as I can. Like that's a that's 4 by 4 actually right there.
Oh,
I love putting like little worlds or big worlds in the smallest of spaces, making them almost look grand and almost surprising people when they find out how small they actually are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. To answer a couple questions in the chat, I don't sell through galleries. I'm not gallery. I've never pursued the gallery representation. I'm not what I would call like a traditional New York artist. I think a lot of the stuff that I've done, which sort of in my online community makes me look like I'm accomplished, would be scoffed at by some of the galleries here. So for example, like the fact that Nancy referenced an article I wrote in Cloth Paper Scissors magazine. I used to have a column in that. Like, that's pretty cool. But you tell that to like, a Chelsea gallery, and that's gonna probably rule me out before they even look at my work, because of the whole issue, which is a pet peeve of mine, craft versus art. I am, but I'm not gonna go on my soapbox because that would be the rest of the time we're here. This piece, Moments, this is 4 inches by 4 inches. Really not sure if it's called Moments at all. Lauren asked a really interesting question in the chat. Do I think any aspects of your professional work with brain trauma informs your art, and how and what way? I would say that my work as a psychologist really informs my work. It took me a long time to realize that, because I used to kind of fight to keep my world separate. But in 2 ways. One, as I work, I'm very conscious about creating layers. The way I work in so many layers, it's all about the layers to me, and the layers. And I believe that's the blue piece that you were referencing before, which again, you can see it's a lot of mark making, a lot of collage, paint, some of the text. And when I say paint, this is probably all acrylic, which is my usual go-to. Lost my train of thought. Somebody, brain trauma. Okay, so that was just perfect. To me, when I think about us as humans, we are very multi-layered. Like, you are looking at me and this is what you see. But kind of what you see and what I'm saying is all about everything that's inside me. It's all the layers underneath. It's all the history. It's all the stuff that you don't know about. Maybe I'm not sharing or would never share. That's what makes us who we are. And I feel like that's how I create my art. Like, people will often say like, well, why do you bother making like 55 layers when no one's going to see the bottom layer? Well, first of all, a little bit might peek through, but more, that initial layer is going to determine what the next layer is, which is going to determine the next layer, which is just like how I feel we are as humans. So I really feel like my art reflects that. And then in the other way is that when I teach and kind of what I do in my online communities, it's really all about, it ends up being almost, well, let me put it this way, having a psych background really helps. Those of you who teach will understand what I mean when I say that. Alice asked a really good question directly to me, but I'm going to answer it aloud. What do you make your marks with? I make my marks with anything and everything. I go through periods where I'm obsessed with one mark maker. Really, probably the one I use the most is a Stabilo all pencil. I don't know if you guys all know about those. They're really small because that just tells you how much I use them. They're normally like pencil size. These are just mark making. They're pencils that are water soluble. So you can make a line, you can smudge the line, you can then wet it and it almost bleeds like paint. It's much softer than a journal marker. It allows me to just be really free. They come in lots of different colors. They are not permanent. So there's sometimes bleeding that happens when you say add a layer of, say, matte medium, but I love that because that just encourages the materials kind of to do what they want to do.
Could you put that closer? I couldn't see it.
Sure. The reason why it's called all, let me see there.
It's
The reason
called
why
what?
It's, oh, let me write, I'm going to type it in. It's called
Okay.
the Stabilo all, Stabilo all, ALL. And the reason why it's called an all is because it's an all surface marker. It's almost like a China marker. It works on glass, metal, plastic, acrylic, paper, anything like that. So no matter what area in art or what you work on, the pencil will work. But again, it's not for those of you who are like, say, somebody who's sketching and wants to keep it pristine, because as soon as your arm just leans on the piece you're working on, it will start smudging. And I love that. I love the softness and how it bleeds one part of the piece into another part of the piece. But again, I make marks with lots of things. I'm not one to make my own brushes and stuff like that. I've never gone that path, but most of us will use what we have, like things that are not meant to be art materials. I think I speak to people who understand when I say that. As I sort of continue my journey and started to make these choices, I'm going to just get back to this a little bit. I started to spend a lot of time traveling and teaching. I love teaching because in person, because it's a room full of creative people. It just really fuels me. It excites me. It gets me interested in creating. And there's just so much energy in a room. And while I was doing it, I felt like I had discovered the key to the universe because I love to travel. And here I was traveling and being paid. And then like teaching art and then going out to dinner with the people that I was teaching with. And I mean, that students in the class, like who gets to do that? Again, not my dream. I didn't grow up dreaming that, but man, when I had it, it was amazing. And then all that changed, need I say, during the pandemic. Now, when I say I traveled everywhere, I've been very, very fortunate. I've taught in Mexico, all over Europe. I spent a month every year in Australia teaching. I just really, really incredibly fortunate person how this has played out. But that all ended. And one of the good things was the fact that I did live in New York City and had made a decision before I shifted from my psych practice to my art practice, was that I knew that I needed to prove to myself that I could survive just on art. And of course, I can't. So art can't just be for me selling my art. That has never been true, that I can just sell my art and live in New York anyway. So I knew that I needed, quote unquote, multiple streams of income. And that was a really big part of the process of deciding how I wanted to move forward. And I'm telling you this for a reason, and I'll explain in 1 minute. But so over this course of time, I made art and sold it. And I tried to exhibit in New York as much as I could. So pretty much once a year, I would do some sort of show. I've done the Other Art Fair in Brooklyn a bunch of times. I've done, I'm blanking on all the show names. This is one of my faux and caustic pieces, by the by, that I've used my vintage beeswax on. You kind of get a flavor of that. I've done some of the shows down at the piers. These are the ones where you pay a lot of money to get a booth, lest you think that, I have some like special talent that gets me in shows. So I did that. I was teaching and traveling. So I was earning money through teaching. I also had 2 books, so I was earning some royalties. And over the course of time, I fell into designing products for art as well. So I've worked with many different companies over the years, and I now work with 4 or 5. And I have my own line of stencils and stamps, paint, inks, embossing powders, really a really wide range of products. And those products pay me royalties. And then to boot, I opened up my own online shop to sell my own products initially. And then the pandemic happened. So my income, which was probably about 50% was from my teaching, just stopped. And I know many of you understand because you've experienced something like that. So I did a big pivot, a word that I hate, and I basically turned online, taught online for the first time, never wanted to teach online. And I've built quite a big community online. I have a Facebook community. It's called Seth Apter Creative Community. It's a group that opened bizarrely 2 months before the pandemic hit, and has become a hub for me. And I started teaching online, and I built up my store because my store is online. So now in my store, not only do I sell my own products, and I'll get back to what this is in a moment, but I sell lots of other things from other artists, designers, products. I spend a lot of time sourcing things from all over the world. I do a lot with that. And the reason why I'm saying this is because had I not decided that I needed multiple streams of income, and I had all these other things in place, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'm not sure what I'd be doing, but I don't know how I couldn't have gotten through the pandemic as an artist. Just would not have happened. So I appreciate that maybe having my own business as a private practice psychologist prepared me for this. I just want to take 1 or 2 minutes to tell you about some bigger projects that I've done that have really meant a lot to me. And also share with you something that I'm doing now that I would even like suggest maybe some of you might want to get involved with. What I've noticed is that the highlights for me have been, well, there have been many, but a lot that have been connected with New York City. So I did a series of classes at the New York Public Library, and I just loved that. I know there was just something about, like, it just felt so surreal that this guy here was teaching like in the public library in New York. That just was very special to me. In 2019, I was involved with a group called Sing for Hope, which maybe some of you know. Sing for Hope is an amazing group. They're, I think they're all over, but there's a New York-based chapter. And this, what they do, among other things, is they bring artists and musicians into nursing homes and hospitals, and they do that throughout the year. But once a year, they have a big project, which maybe some of you have seen. It's called the Piano Project. And what you do is you apply to become a piano artist. And if you're accepted with a design, you get invited to basically decorate a piano. So in downtown Manhattan and Wall Street area, they take over a cavernous space, and there's 50 pianos. They're all sitting there, all these old pianos, and every artist is assigned a piano. And you go in over the course of a couple months, and you literally paint, decorate, collage your piano based on your proposal. And it was such an amazing experience. You know, for somebody who works with 6 by 6 inches, this was a beast and a workout. Something I'm really excited I had a chance to do. It sort of debuted downtown with all the rest of the pianos, and then it spent 6 weeks outside, although undercover, in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And then it was donated to a school on Avenue X in Brooklyn. And I was able to go the day they opened it up to the students, and these, I mean, preschool, the cutest little kids all singing. It was really an amazing experience. And the other amazing experience in New York I had was pre-pandemic in 2018. The Garment District does an event every year, and they have what they call Maker's Way, where they have a small group of artists sort of have booths, have interactive booths, and create and make art with people. And it was in the middle of Broadway, which was shut down, and just really, in my mind, kind of crazy and iconic for me. And then there was this that you see on the screen. This is a project I did in Taos, New Mexico. I always work small, but I have grand dreams to work big. And one of the things I do kind of like to do is conceptually sort of what I would call maybe installation art. So this is an example of an installation I made. It's at the Mabel Dodge Lewin House, which is in Taos. Doesn't exist anymore. It was a short-lived. Karen, I do have a picture, but I don't think I shared the piano. Maybe I can text it to the Nancys after, and they can do their magic and let everybody see it. But this is a Kiva fireplace there, and I spent 2 weeks in an art residency, basically making a lot of the art that you see there. And then also I brought a lot because I honestly, I did not know this is what it was going to be. I just brought a lot for a 2-week residency. Very upset that I didn't have an idea because I didn't want to waste the time. And it's called Passing Through. And it was probably about the 3rd day or 4th day I was there. I was having breakfast, and some people who were not artists who were just sitting there, we had a conversation, and they were just talking about this concept of passing through. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, I'm here to do an installation with this notion of I'm passing through, creating this art, moving on, putting this up, and then taking it down, which I thought would be quite painful, but really was just part of the whole process. And I think if you go to the next slide, there is a close-up of one of the sections. So you can just see a little bit more. Some of it's artwork, some of it's just ephemera. found objects. I mean, I brought a lot of stuff down there because not knowing what I wanted to do, I needed to make sure that whatever I chose, I'd be able to do. And a good number of those pieces, and again, they're small, were created while I was there. So that was kind of an exciting thing for me. I love New Mexico. I love Taos. I teach there twice a year. I'm going back in June, which will be my first time traveling and teaching since the pandemic. So I'm anxious and excited about that. And then if you go to the next picture, I don't remember what it is, but I know it's going to trigger something. Yeah. So that is also an art installation, and that's actually what's behind me. So I have this ritual where every January, I take down what I call my inspiration wall. This is about, well, you can kind of see behind me, it's about, I don't know, 3.5 feet by 4 feet, 5 feet, something like that. And it's magnetic panels and art on the magnetic panels. And it's a ritual for me. I leave it up all year, almost untouched. And then in just January, I take it down. And I tragically try to put it back up, always upset that I actually took it down because it's so much of an effort to make. But as I make it, I get really into it. And I love looking back over the years because it represents who I am in that moment as an artist, and seeing the photos year by year. It's been fascinating to me to see the changes. And this is some of my art, but a lot of it is art that I've bought or has been gifted to me from friends, stuff I've torn out of books, found objects, bits and pieces, flotsam and jetsam. But I think there's another shot of something. Maybe it's, oh yeah, so that's where I'm sitting. It looks a little bit different now, but this is my segue into the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll take more questions. So things have been moved around a lot, but my studio, it's one room it's one full room. I am really fortunate by New York City standards to have a large room, and also a lot of closets, which unheard of. Although, relative to the rest of the world, my idea of a lot of closets probably wouldn't even fill a walk-in closet in Houston, Texas. But for me, it's a lot of closets. And I also not only have all my stuff, but because I design products with so many companies, you can see in that middle bookcase, that metal bookcase toward the back, that's some of my inks and things. And then I have my shop with lots of other things. It's a feat to store everything. And so I'm naturally pretty organized, but I have become so organized because I couldn't live otherwise. So this was actually a photo that I took for a feature that I was in, bizarrely, in Where Women Create magazine. Are people familiar with Where Women Create and What Women Create? It's a magazine. It's an amazing magazine. I think I have. I'm coming back, I promise. This is, I think, the current issue. It's just a beautiful magazine with no ads. It is by a woman who I'm sort of very fortunate to call a friend. She's the editor, Jo Packham, and founder. It highlights mostly women in where they create. That's the title. She also has a magazine called What Women Create, which highlights their work. She also, though, feeling the need to have some level of inclusion and diversity, sometimes has a man or a couple. In the current issue, I think there's a couple. And she has a little section that she calls Men Who Make It, to differentiate. So I was maybe about a year ago in the magazine, when my studio was in the magazine. And so this is one of the shots. Again, I move things around a lot, so it's a little different. Segue, and then I'll finish up. Jo and I are friends, the editor, and I've taught at her studio in Utah in the past. And I am in the fortunate position, yet again, to be writing an article for an upcoming issue. And so for that article, I put out a call, and this is where you guys come in. So I've put out a call, which I'm I'm going to type my website, which is sethapter.com. On my website, on the homepage, there's a link that will take you to the details of the call. It's actually quite simple, but the deadline is Sunday. And what I'm doing is I'm writing an article that I have no clue what I'm writing about, because I'm waiting for the material to come in, which will determine. So I write my articles exactly how I make my art. I just start. I do everything like that, everything. So I am just asking people to send me no more than 3 high-res photos of not their studio, like a shot like this, but of something more like my wall. I'm asking do you have an inspiration wall? Do you have an inspiration board? Do you have a wall of your art? Do you have a little vignette on a desk? Do you have a tabletop that has like old books and tchotchkes and vintage stuff, boxes maybe? Do you have a bookcase where you've displayed pottery that you have or things that people have given you? So it's not about like a whole studio. It's about a single shot of something that's you're surrounded by in your space that kind of brings you inspiration or kind of brings you beauty or gets you in the spirit of art, along with a couple paragraphs that talks about that. Not like, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm an artist from Long Island. It talks about, this is special to me because it's a shrine to so-and-so. Or, you know, this includes artwork from all my closest friends, or this shows my progression from when I started to when I finished, that kind of thing. If that appeals to you at all, please send them to me. There are very few rules, but I do ask you to follow the guidelines. And it just needs to come to me by Sunday. Again, you can go to sethapter.com. Oh, I see. I just direct messaged that. I meant to send that to everybody in the group, sorry. So that's sethapter.com. It's pretty easy to remember as long as you can look at your email and see how my name is spelled. And I would love, love, love and encourage you all. Now, I have no clue how many I'm going to get. I've been getting them and I barely look at them. I need to like focus on something else right now. But after Sunday, I'll look at them all and see what comes. And who knows, maybe I can, you know, share your studio. And again, come full circle. I love doing things like this because for me, that's the collaboration in the community, which Patricia brought to me when I first started making art. And really the choices I make are all about that. Oh, I think I've been sending messages to individual people, not realizing, sorry about that. So I'm gonna end. I think I kind of was in my 45-minute, 50-minute range, kind of. And if anybody has any other questions, I am ready to answer. Judy, your hand's up. I'm not sure if that's a question or, okay.
The way that you work, doing the collage and layers and everything, I love that. How do you know when a piece is done? Do you know? Do you come back to it? Is when you say it done, is it done?
Such a good question, and really hard to answer. I'm going to give you like 15 different answers. I usually start by telling a story. You know how, well, as a mixed media artist, you tell somebody, they say, oh, what do you make? Well, I'm a mixed media artist. And they look at you with that face, like they got no clue. And then you try to describe what that means and they still have no clue. Paper and whatever I want. And, you know, it could be like, you know, the lettuce bag and I pick things up off the floor and there's still like no clue. So I tell people, if you're with somebody and then you say, well, let me just show you a couple pieces so I can explain. What I say to you guys is those pieces that you're going to show, then you know you're done. Because there's probably, for everyone you're going to show, there might be 3, 4, 5, 6 that you might never show or not happily show. They're probably not done. But I'm only half kidding when I say that. But I do a few things. I almost never finish a piece in a sitting. So it takes me fresh eyes. And when I have fresh eyes, whether it's the next day, a week, a month, I often see it completely differently. And so because I work overtime on so many pieces at once, I feel like I can eventually come to a place where I do think it's finished. And for me, being finished involves kind of two things. Mostly it involves just an intuition. I just kind of know. I can't really define it. I see some of you shaking your head. You kind of know. Then also the other thing is I often, when I think it's finished, is I take a photograph and I look at it on my laptop screen, because there's something about seeing it larger on a computer screen, backlit, where areas that need work are so clear to me. And then I often rework work. So the first piece I showed here, I know you won't remember the quote unquote first piece. That was a piece I made in 2018, which doesn't look anything like the piece I made in 2018, because about a month ago, I completely reworked it. I kind of thought it was done then, never loved it. Again, didn't have the intuition. And I finally felt like I needed to work on it. So for me, in a manner of speaking, some things are never off limits to being reworked. Yeah. I know that doesn't quite answer the question, but
Oh, that's good.
okay.
That's great.
Helene, did you have a question?
Yes, Seth. First of all, I enjoyed your presentation so much. It was wonderful and inspiring. But
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to tell you and everybody that I took one of those online courses of yours a bunch of months ago on altering photographs.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I got out all my old photos that I have no idea what to do with and fooled around with them. And I'm part of a mixed media group, and passed on the information to them. And we did some projects involving altered photographs. So just wanted to give you some feedback on that.
Thank you. Really, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That was something that I picked up because of copyright issues. Back when I didn't know anything, I'd use anything. This was before I was selling work or anything like that, but I learned quite quickly. And so for me, now unless it's like really a private journal that no one's going to see, I'm fine with using anything in that. But other than that, I really tried not to use other people's things. So that sort of naturally led me to photographs that I've taken. But to me, putting a photograph in without altering the photograph or mixed mediafying it, it just never worked right. So that class was about that. Just, subtle plug, since you brought it up, if you're at all interested in any of or learning about my online classes, again, if you go to sethapter.com, there's a link. You can go to a page that's just my online workshops, both live and also the recorded ones. You can check it out if you like, but obviously no obligation. Nancy?
There's no obligation, but I'd really be interested in hearing what classes that what is coming up for you and what you're going to be teaching. And I assume they're going to be virtual for a while?
Yeah, I've discovered, it's sort of ridiculous to say that I've discovered this online world. It's not that I didn't connect with it before. I was always very pro social media and my blog and everything, but I spent so much time traveling and teaching, I could never really foster it the way I wanted to. And as a result of the pandemic, again, some positive to pull out of tragedy, I've just connected with so many people online. So the hub is Seth Apter Creative Community, and part of what I do is teach. And I teach in two ways. So every Wednesday, every single friggin' Wednesday for like pandemic start to now, and many other days during the pandemic, but continuing on Wednesday at 3:00 p.m. Eastern, I do a free 90-minute demo on my Facebook page. It's like a class. I'm a teacher who believes like if you're going to teach, you teach. You don't like hold back. If I'm going to demo, I demo. I don't like demo like half the thing, so then people will want to pay me to take the rest of it. It's like a full class really is every week. And so if you do want to join me for that, it's free. You can kind of see my style. And then throughout the pandemic, I've done these Facebook Live classes. I've tried to keep the prices really, really low, especially from the beginning. So they range from 2 to 3 hour live classes. They they range from a cost of $20 to $45 per class. And they're all recorded and available as recorded. And there's classes on creating mixed media backgrounds, class on like, well, now that you've done your background, like what the hell do you do? Because like we all like making backgrounds, but who knows how to do a focal anything. There's a class about mark making. And then in addition and separate from that, at the Northlight Books, who I published the books with, I also did a whole series of DVDs, which don't exist anymore because, you know, DVDs, I might as well say 8-tracks, like they just, I know some people still use them, but really the company won't put them out. So they've turned all my DVDs into streamable and downloadable video classes. And that's, for example, the altered photo class. And I actually just finished, for the first time, I did a business class. It's really an intense business class. It was called Mind Your Business. It was a month-long class for the entire month of February. It was all live, Zoom lives, all Zoom individual meetings, group meetings, twice a week group meetings, individual meetings. I was really happy with how it went, but I probably will not do that again because it's just so labor intensive till next year. My next class, I can give you the date, but I can't tell you what it is because I haven't figured it out yet, but it's my next Facebook Live class. It's April. Maybe I can't give you the date. No, April, Tuesday, April 12th during the day. I think it's like 1 to 4. I do not know the content of it yet. I also just wanted to share in case any of you do like to travel a little bit, maybe a little bit later in the year. I'm teaching almost nowhere in person this year. I'm teaching in New Mexico in June. I'm teaching in Kentucky in July. And I'm teaching in October at the Hudson River Valley Art. We'll call it a center. It's not really a center. It's just south of Albany in Greenville. And it's a 5+ day retreat, like a night and then 5 days, teaching a class that I call Time Capsule. It's at an inn, a historic inn from the 1800s. It's fall in upstate New York. I'm hoping that it was supposed to be already and it was canceled like so many things. So I'm hoping in October it will work. But that is available. It's the only class that still has seats, and I just want to show it to you. So everybody kind of brings their own box. This is an old vintage lunchbox. And then we work on projects that nest in other boxes in the box and kind of create a time capsule. So again, kind of hard to see without everything falling out. But if you open up all these different things in here, like these tins, inside the tins, this is sort of a found object fiber art project. There's little mini books. I love making really tiny small books, as you can see by the size of it. There's just stuff. But if anyone is thinking maybe they want to venture and have an adventure and are comfortable at some point, that would be your one and only opportunity to see me live this year. In teaching anyway. Any other questions, Judy?
Do you do anything digitally? Do you use any, Photoshop, anything in your work?
I'm going to say no and yes. So all the work that you saw, there's no digital component. The only time I'm always honest, so I always admit it, like I don't have Photoshop. I don't know how to use Photoshop. I use sort of these online programs that I can figure out, but the only time I use them is when I create, say, like icons for social media, like announcing something. However, amongst my products includes rubber stamps, and I design rubber stamps for 2 companies. And in order to, which not a lot of people do, like it's kind of weird in a way. So in order to make sure that I don't pit the companies against each other, I try to design very differently. So my original company, which is Impression Obsession, all my stamps are hand done, either hand drawn or created. And Paper Artsy, the other company, 95% of them are digitally designed. So I do my designs digitally, and they might make it in my art. So in a manner of speaking, there's a digital component, but that would be the only digital component. And it's not for lack of thinking it's worth it. I just got no clue, really. Like, yeah, I'd upload the art, and then is it high resolution? And if I print it, and yeah, I know my limits.
And also, do you work in a series ever, or multiples?
I do. Yeah, so let me get a piece off the wall. Probably my most recent series, which was fall of last year, I think, was something I call Relics. So this is 4x4. It's on a cradle wood panel. It's a picture, I think, actually, that you might have used in sort of the newsletter. Mm-hmm. So I call this Relics, and they all started basically with similar handmade, not by me paper in the background. And then I worked over it with collage material and a lot of found and vintage objects. So they're all, to me, they're sort of like, I call them kind of assemblages on board. But the whole idea of the relics were they're all telling their own each one's telling their own story. This one's called When the Dust Settles, about something. Could be about me, could be about history. There were two types of these, ones that look kind of like that with sort of these 3D objects. And the other ones I called, within the relic series, kind of a mesa series. And they were made a lot with stacked fiber. I don't think I showed any of those. And altered paper and things smothered in other things. And they were meant to look kind of like southwestern mesas. And there was always either something like a sun setting or a moon rising, or as well. And I do like working in series because it helps me to explore a concept. I don't know what the concept is till I begin. And then I make something and I'm eager to make it again. And then it becomes a series. And so then I am driven by the concept of the series, which might have its own sort of rules and guidelines. And that's probably the closest I get to knowing what I'm going to create before I begin. And I work a lot in journals. I really love working in journals. The last journal I finished, I'm working in a new one, is this one. This one is the first time I've ever worked in a journal with no words. The only word is on the cover. The words say pours forth. But when you open it up and you just see the different pages there, it's just completely it's just all visual, just no text at all. A lot of mark making, and you ask about when things are done. Like, I have no problem. Here's one of the Stabilo walls. Like, I can open up to this page and just like very freely add to it with like no issue at all. And when I did that, this little piece came up. So that probably means it's not supposed to be there. And I'm very free in the journals, which I really like. I try to bring those to my artwork. I do find though that my journals, they're always a little bit more organic than the work I do on, say, panels, which is the typical thing I work on. Alice?
Yes, what is this product that you have that's wax, beeswax?
Oh, okay. So not everybody knows embossing powders. But so I'm just going to give you like a brief rundown. Embossing powders are basically, here's an example. Oh, this is not the one I'm referencing. So it's basically plastic that are in little tiny crystals. So I don't want to shake it because it might shake out. And I've worked with 2 companies to design some of these. Basically what you do is you have some sort of adhesive material And you can use pretty much anything adhesive, but there are like rubber stamp pads, but they're gluey rather than inky colored. And you just basically you apply it, you pour the powder over it, shake off the excess, and you heat it with a heat tool, and it melts the wax and it becomes permanent. And historically it was developed for stampers. So, most traditional way to do it is you take your rubber stamp, you ink the rubber stamp with the goop, you stick it on your thing, you pour it on, you dump it off, and then you have that thing. What I really wanted to do was create some powders that were more about mixed media layers. And so one of the powders, really the one that hit, was called Vintage Beeswax. And it's kind of a clear, it's translucent, and it's got this sort of honey amber tone to it. So it really works well if you're going in that sort of vintage flavor. It does color, just like any translucent paint, it does color shift. So it depends on what you have underneath. It kind of shifts the colors. If you put it on blue, it turns it a little greenish, a little bit. And if you apply it across the entire surface and you melt it and you do that 3 times, you get quite a thick coating that really does resemble melted wax. And you can embed objects in it. You can collage with it. I coat papers with it. I coat fabric with it. There's a lot you can do with it. It's just fun. It's just kind of a fun product to explore. But you do need the heat tool. You can't do, say, a hair dryer or anything like that. It's not concentrated enough, the heat. I don't know if I've sold anybody on that, but it's kind of you know what you can do, actually, if anyone's even remotely interested in exploring that, I have a YouTube channel, which I don't use very often, but there are 2 or 3 videos on the YouTube channel that shows exactly how I create a piece with this sort of faux encaustic technique. And that will explain it so much better than I just did. You'll totally get it. And either you'll love it or you won't. If you're an encaustic artist, you may not groove with it, because really it's almost sacrilegious to say it's faux encaustic, because it's not, but it's easy and it's inexpensive. So and I make money if you buy it, so I can't, certainly can't complain about that. Kathleen, did you have a question? You're muted.
Yes. So
Okay.
my question is, where do you get the heat tool? Do you sell that as well?
I used to sell the heat tool, but it became sort of this behemoth to ship. It just didn't fit in the right boxes, and it's like $15 to ship. So you can, if you go to really any craft site, like if you go to an online like scrapbook.com, Simon Says Stamp, or any kind of craft store, they will have them. I can tell you the one I use, I like. It's, dare I say, it's from the company that I design powders for, but it's from a company called Wow. And the reason why I like it is because it's one of the few dual heat tools. So it has most of them are 1 speed. This has a high and a low. So for example, if I use the low, say if I want to dry art, I don't do that too often. I'm really impatient, and I don't want to like waste my time heat tooling, so I'll just put it aside and do something else until it dries. But that's what I would use, versus I use the high for the embossing powder, because the embossing powder sometimes takes a little, not that long, but I'm very impatient as an artist. And so
it has a fan. Does it have?
It has an internal fan, and you just have to be really careful. Actually, that's a really good point. Lots of people hold it where the fan is. And if you do that, it can overheat. So they've also created, it's really hard to see, but it's almost got like a waist. So it's a natural place to hold it. But really any heat tool will be fine. And I use like lots of things that traditionally are not meant to be used with embossing powders. Like most people do use the pad. I use matte medium, I use glue sticks. I've even created a product because why not, right? It's got the goop in a bottle, so I can pour the goop out. It also has a brush integrated in the cap, so I can brush it on. But you don't need to buy, like, seriously, like, you don't have to buy this. You can use a glue stick. You can use a wet ink pad. If you just have a dye-based ink pad, I don't know how many of you have that, that stays wet long enough to do this.
Mhm.
You know, as much as I like when people purchase what I create, the products, I am also equally saying, like, let's be real, we all have already spent too much money on stuff. You don't need to. You can use stuff that you have, and you might need one thing, but you don't need three
Mhm.
to make it happen.
Thank you.
Sure. You guys, I wanted to say you have been amazing. I'm not saying I'm going anywhere, because probably if you're all sitting here, I'll probably be here another hour or two. But I just really, really appreciate the level of interest in the questions, because the last thing I wanted to do is like just babble at you. And like, I mean, like I said, I don't think I'm a great storyteller, but sort of the way my life in art unfolded, it tells itself. But I'm not one to like spend 6 hours wanting to like tell my story. So the fact that you've all broken it up with these really good questions has just made this like such a pleasure for me. And again, if you all want to stay until you kick me out, I'm probably going to answer questions. So if anyone has any,
It's
let
been
me know.
great.
I was wondering, how did you know the chemistry and the what enabled you to create products like that? I mean, that sounds like some sort of engineering chemical thing.
You know, it depends on the company. So for example, for the stamps and stencils, it's not that easy, but I'm going to say it's as easy as drawing. So those kinds of products, it just entails drawing. And then when you design stencils, you have to learn that when you draw something, like if you draw a circle, that's not going to work as a stencil because it's just going to completely fall out. You have to sort of design it with these bridges and links and things like that. But when it's the products that are like inks and paints, it really depends on the company. So with my paints, which is also with a company called Paper Artsy, I use whatever I want to mix. So I use Paper Artsy paints, and I also use other brands of paints, and I create my own mixes and try to come up with colors that are not already in their range, which includes about 120 paints. So the chemistry of that is as simple as what you guys probably do when you paint. You're literally mixing. If I discover something that I want to turn into a paint color that I've mixed, I do my best to remember what it is, recreate it, send them a swatch. They send it to their paint people who tries to match the swatch. We discuss whether we want the paint to be translucent, semi-translucent, or opaque. See if they can do that, because depending upon the pigment, you may or may not be able to do that. They send the sample to me. I paint it out and say, no, too dark, too light. And we go back and forth literally via the mail.
I was thinking more in terms of the embossing powder, though. Did you
The
have?
embossing powder, so my company, Wow, they have been very gracious. They have sent me every single embossing powder crystal base that exists in their company. So I'm near 100 containers, like super fine black, translucent, corn muffin, whatever they call them. And then I just try to think of an idea and I make my own mixes. I have to be very good about tracking the measurement. I melt them, I mix them, I melt them, and I say, no, it's kind of like when I learned to draw back in the day, like draw a face, the face is horrible. And I always tell people this, you want to learn to draw a face, just draw a face over and over again. So I look at the face and I say, oh my God, nobody's ears are that close to the mouth. And then I draw it again with the ears in better place. And I do that with the embossing. Like I'll say, this is way too dark. Let me take out that and add that. And it could take me hours till I hit on something that I like. I write it down and then I keep developing. And I come up with maybe, if I release 6 colors, I try to come up with maybe 20 of those mixes. And
Okay,
then
so they give you the base and you are designing the colors.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm kind of verbose, so I probably could answer most of your questions with a yes or no.
No,
So-
no, I just thought, I just thought maybe that how would anybody think of developing some kind of powder like that that would turn into, that would turn into like a faux encaustic? And I thought, wow, that's like a chemistry project. But I see that they have the bases, and you're creating the all the different
I'm
colors.
creating the mixes. So I will
Got it,
say, like,
got it.
when I did the original releases of embossing powders, what we tried to do is make them different. So in addition to things, most embossing powder is embossing powder. It's just the plastic crystals. We put in ground up stones for textures. We put in flocking for sort of like a soft feel. We really did think out of the box, and just tried lots of things, a lot of which did not work. And when it worked, it was pretty amazing and really exciting. And then just one thing I'll add, and then on to Barbara, and then Bernadette. With my company I work with all my inks, it's in France, it's Aladdin. They have incredible chemists. And I've been, again, I never forget how fortunate I am to do what I do. I've been lucky to be over there in France twice with them, and that's where we develop the products together. And it's like, we just think like, what do we want? Like, what can we create? And the chemist is there. We all just start to put our heads together. We mix, and then eventually we come upon an idea, and then they take it away. So like, I'm like, that's kind of what I'm going for. And then they refine it. They make it color fast. They figure out the recipe, and then they send it to me, and we go back and forth.
And are those alcohol inks?
No, I've never, none of my, all my products are water-based. I've never designed anything alcohol-based. Barbara, and then Bernadette.
The crystals are plastic and you're heating them. Is there a toxic element involved there?
Yes, I'm going to say it's melting plastic. Most people who do it, if you use it traditionally, where you're like stamping one stamp, really no issue at all. If you're going to do the whole encaustic thing, especially if you're using a larger piece, you really want to be masked, and you really want to have ventilation. And ventilation could, for me, it's opening my window. And then it's okay, but it's very, very easy to breathe in the crystals too, not just the fumes, because they get everywhere. You pour them back in. And so I've definitely, before I use the mask, I know that I swallow. You can tell you're like, it's not good. So you do want to do it. I'm overly cautious at this point. If I emboss, I have a mask on, period. And how great with the pandemic, like, what's a mask? I got a million of them. So now, like, it's not even a second thought. Thank you. Bernadette?
I was wondering if you ever use natural pigments for yourself, not commercially for your products, but like natural indigo or, other pigments.
I'm going to say mostly no, with a little bit of a yes. So there was a period of time where I did get some sort of natural pigments and use them to try to mix them in product development. But the only time I've done that is when I periodically go into like fiber dyeing, eco dyeing. Like, I don't do it like enough to even be comfortable to teach, but I will periodically, whether it's, walnut ink or vegetables and things like that, I will sort of make baths and dye fabric and paper. Rust, wrap in rust and all that kind of thing. Other than that, though, I haven't explored it. I fake it. Like, this particular one this particular embossing powder is called rustic indigo. I've tried to fake it for everybody, and I love indigo, but it's so not real indigo.
I'll send you some.
That's so sweet of you to even suggest it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a bottle of walnut ink that a friend made a long time ago that I covet, and I use it a lot. It used to be a very big spray bottle. It's now down to the little guy, and I'm at the point where I treasure it too much to use it as freely as I used to. in part because it's just was a special gift from another artist. Her name's Oley, who I taught with quite a long time ago. So I kind of want to make it last.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right, is everybody ready to fall asleep? Way past your bedtime. I just want to say that a couple other things just to thank everybody. Really, really, thank you. This has really been a pleasure for me. If you want to learn more about me, my website is just Seth Apter. If you go to the About page, it's links to everything because we all have to be everywhere. So you can go to my Pinterest, my Instagram, my Facebook, my YouTube, my newsletter, any of those. So if you're one of those centric, that's where to go. If you want to really get to know my art, I would say go to Instagram. I curate it very strongly. So it's really, with the exception of 1 or 2 plugs here and there, it's all art all the time. It's only art. It's my art. And so people can get a better sense of that. And I would love, love, love if any of you feel like you do want to contribute or submit for contributing that article in Where Women Create, please take that seriously. I would absolutely love to, to take as many. I really want to make this a very special article. It's very different what they usually do, which is always focused on one individual person in their studio. So it's an opportunity, and I would love just to have the best that I can have to pull from. All right, I'll keep quiet now. Thanks, Nancy and Nancy.
Could
and
you
Judy and
repeat
everybody.
how to do that? Wait, where is that?
Oh, sure. So if you just go to sethapter.com, my homepage, my website, on the homepage, as you scroll down, you'll see there's just a little icon. It says call for submissions or call for art or something. If you click on that, that will take you to my blog post that gives you all the different guidelines. There's really not many guidelines. It's pretty minimal, but I would ask you to read it and follow them just to make my life a little easier.
Will do.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Seth. It was really, really interesting and informative. And it's really exciting, all the different aspects of your art practice that you have going on. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I hope that you will be hearing from some of us if we can not be too embarrassed about the bombs that look like they hit our studios. I'm speaking for myself, and the people that know me know that's true, but thank you really so much. And I think you'll be probably hearing from some of us. Excellent.
I hope so. And again,
Yes.
Thank you guys. I'm now going to follow all your work and was really mightily impressed at what Judy said in the beginning about, where the annual exhibits are and all like that. And I explored the website, so I've already seen a lot of your work, and it's mighty impressive. You guys are the real meal deal. So I love that. So I appreciate you even listening to me.
Thanks a lot.
All right. I'm going to sign off, guys. So you have a good night.